Good morning, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. So, today we have yet another enhanced risk here, and the streak continues with this now because we're on our third day in a row with it. So, it's a pretty active week so far. Definitely not what I was expecting by any stretch of the imagination here. We have about at least 70, maybe even 80 million people under the gun for severe weather here, with the greatest risk being, of course, the enhanced risk here, stretching from Chicago all the way towards Sioux Falls and maybe even getting very close to Norfolk, Nebraska here. So make sure you're hitting that like button, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, and decimating that share button as well, because we need to get this info out to as many people as we can, and doing that will help us by getting us further into the algorithm. That being said, main threat for today, this is a wind-driven enhanced risk, and we can't disclude anyone in the slight risk. So really the greatest threat is going to be for about 40 million plus people. Hail threat's also pretty notable too. We could see an upgrade to that possibly. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And we would see that more towards Sioux Falls, Norfolk, and maybe getting a little bit close to Pierre, South Dakota here with this hatched risk. So that means that there's a chance for hail above 2 inches in diameter. Can't disinclude anyone in the just the yellow area right here. There is a decent chance that you could get hail above 2 inches as well, but most notable threat for hail is, of course, going to be at the hatched risk. Tornado threat as of right now is less than 2%. This was 2% when I looked at yesterday's forecast for the day. But the thing is, though, there is an interesting area that's going to pop up over here that leads me to wonder between Milwaukee and Chicago if they might bring that 2% back. Also, not going to disinclude the marginal risk over here towards Maine. I think this is going to be more of an earlier in the day type of deal. These storms are going to be forming later in the evening. One other thing I'm going to note before I get into the forecast models as well is that there could be a little bit of a change to where this enhanced risk is located, because there's going to be a couple different rounds of storms here. The timing of that will determine a lot with who gets what over here. I'm definitely confident about this area over here towards Des Moines and further off towards the east, but west of there towards Sioux Falls, Norfolk could be different, because that looks like it could be an overnight threat actually. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into it here. So this is what we're looking like on the models right now. This is around the time where I would expect storms to really start ramping up here. Definitely noticing the southeasterly or east-southeasterly component with these storms. But main thing to note here is that at 500, we're actually looking pretty decent here. It's nothing insane. I've seen much stronger at 500, but it's one of the better setups I've seen. Getting up to about 60 to 70 knots. Haven't seen that as much, really not since last month, I would say. There have been a few setups this month where we were pretty good. If it was, then it was more so early. But fact of the matter is there is a little bit of a dip here. The trough isn't super pronounced or anything like that, so I wouldn't expect a tornado outbreak of any kind, but definitely a notable straight line wind setup. But we go to 700 millibars. We're going to be looking for the short wave here. I'll go ahead and circle that whenever it pops up. And really, it doesn't seem to develop until about 00 to 01Z. But this area right here is where I'm looking at right now. It's right across here. That's our first short wave. Then our second one is going to end up being a little bit further off to the west. Let me get that off of there. This area here kind of pops up here. Neither of these are super pronounced. I think the first one was a little bit better. This one, of course, is also noticeable, but the thing that I want you to note here is look at the timing, 09Z. So for those of you that don't know what Zulu time is, basically I live in Eastern time, so I would go back about 5 hours. This would be 4 a.m. for me. So this would be about 3 a.m. So this is an overnight severe threat here. And questions would remain in regards to instability and moisture. It does look like that from what I've seen on the models here that these storms will have plenty of instability to work with. But there are a few other questions as far as low-level kinematics and maybe even more so towards moisture itself that could be coming into question here. Of course, this is the Corn Belt, so we always have to keep that in mind. That being said, we see what I'm talking about though. If you were to go to O2 to O3Z, you can kind of see the moisture's kind of going away from this area, so a little bit of uncertainty on my end at least as far as the severe weather threat is concerned. However, interestingly enough, as those storms would start to develop, get towards O60, that moisture starts to get pulled in. So I think as that short wave develops, maybe it'll start to pull in some moisture because the Gulf of Mexico flow, it still has a little bit of that component where we're going from southwest to northeast here. So like I said, interesting stuff going on here. So for the most part, I'm thinking overnight threat for this region here, and then middle of the evening threat for this area here. Both of them are still within the parameters for severe weather, dew points in the 60s and even into the 70s for some. So, like I said, definitely plenty to keep an eye on over here throughout the evening and into the overnight. I'm going to try to see if maybe I can cover one of these. I've been getting my butt kicked at work lately. So, that being said here, let's go ahead and get into the parameters now. One thing that has me concerned with the hail threat is how steep the lapse rates are, especially over towards Nebraska and Iowa, especially as we go late into the evening. So there is some reason to have confidence in the setup here. This is towards 07Z. As we look here, this isn't super duper impressive at this point as far as everything else is concerned. But as we continue to go on here, watch what happens. We go from unfavorable to more favorable. Because look at this. Here's convective inhibition. Very strong cap developed at this point, right? So we're looking at 06, 07Z, right? By 08Z, cap has started to fall off quite a bit. By the time we get to 08, not anything crazy. By the time we get to 09, that's when our storms come in, cap's gone. But it was interesting to see that there are a couple of marginal tornado risk soundings as well. But conditions do look relatively favorable. Instability, of course, with it being late into the evening, into the overnight, not going to be quite that impressive. But nonetheless, though, definitely something to keep a close eye on. The parameters aren't going to be quite as ideal. By the time we go back to this next sounding here, the EHI is definitely pretty low, so is the shear, storm relative felicities. So, like I said, a little bit of a question as to what we'll see here. Definitely going to be getting a lot of rainfall from these storms too, though, so even if you don't get severe weather, flooding could become a thing, especially over this region where we've had multiple rounds of storms over the last few days. So, still some questions to be had there, but nonetheless, definitely looks like we at least have a decent chance of severe here. Definitely impressed with the hail threat for sure. Over towards this region where I'm expecting most of the action to be, the lapse rates aren't quite as steep. We still get some 6s and 6.5s and up towards 7. But I think the hail threat's going to be a little bit more limited. Maybe towards the Great Lakes, we could see a little something more impressive. In fact, there we go right there, but only thing about this is I think the storms have already passed at this point. So let's go back a couple of frames here. And it seems like with this one, this is interesting. But with this component here, there's at least decent low-level shear, but even so, it's not crazy. But like I said, main threat with this is going to be damaging winds, and the decape is definitely a great indicator of that. Seeing that at 1,018 joules per kilogram. Instability is already questionable at this point, so if we go back a couple more frames, probably going to see better instability as well, better decape, slightly steeper lapse rates, but also need to be notable of the hail. Need to be aware of the hail threat. It's more than notable still. Significant hail parameters at 1.1. But as a whole here, of course, like I said, wind being the main threat here. Hail's a little bit more on the minimal side. It'll be interesting to see how they change that risk as we go throughout the day, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some changes. But if we look across the board as far as Cape is concerned, that's not going to be an issue today. We do see storms develop over here a little bit early, but not too early for me to try to catch. But this area looks interesting here. We could see winds maybe up to 70 miles per hour at best right now. That could change. And then, of course, we see this big area of instability over here, about 3,000 plus joules per kilogram. Look at the sounding on this. Like I said, a little bit earlier into the evening, overnight here. A little too strong of a cap. And then as time goes on, go to 09. Actually, over here, there's even stronger cap. So I think they may go away. I think they may go a little bit away from the enhanced risk, maybe back towards slight. I think enhanced risk is going to be more so towards Wisconsin and Illinois today. But we'll see what happens with that. And then after that, we'll go ahead, take a quick look at what radar could look like here. Like I said, low-level shear isn't going to be that impressive, so we're not going to be too concerned with that. And then as we look at reflectivity, here you go. You see plenty of action over here. And this is going to be persistent as we head into the evening hours across this region here. And the time the storm's starting to weaken, we're looking at probably close to midnight for these guys. And then here's that second round starting to pop up here, and we'll switch over to this site here. So, like I said, cap holds out across this region for a large part of the evening, and once we get into the overnight, that's when storms do fire. Actually, this area is a little bit further to the south than I was expecting as well. So that southeasterly component is definitely starting to become a little bit more prevalent. But this little complex of storms here could have some strong winds along with it as well. So, I mean, the 30% area remains, but I don't know. Based off what I saw there, that cap could come into play. Eventually, I think this could be strong enough to move the cap, but like I said, a lot of questions here. But anyways, that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. You found it useful. If you did, you know what to do. Smash the like button, hit the share button, and also hit that subscribe button if you're new. But this has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys a little bit later today, most likely. Till then, take care and have a nice day.